We can look here at the monument. This is the monument done in Legal. The concept was done by myself, Ernest Chauvet, but the welder was Louis Forcade, and the painter was John Ellenberger. The purpose of this monument was to just, in a very clear and simple manner, bring forth the cooperative efforts between the French Canadians, the British, and the First Nations in our Canadian history. We're going to look at a monument in two ways today. We'll look at as is, but adaptations we want to do also to make it more Canadian in focus rather than the local dimension. So in the bottom of the monument, we see Canada. Presently, Canada is painted here with lines for the provinces, but based on geographic climate. You see the Canadian Shield in different areas of Canada. The possibility here is to change that to have each province a separate color, and that might be easier for people to understand and have it through the geographic types of soil or productions and so forth. So this is Canada with a small representation on top. That represents the Northwest Territories and the Yukon. Because of size, it was hard to do. So again, this part of the monument is 20 feet wide and about 6.5 feet high. And again, it's solid steel, welded, reinforced in the back. Right in the center where you see the Hudson's Bay, you see two dates, 1775-1777 and 1812 to 1814. Those dates are important because that's the basis of Canadian duality and the partnership that happened historically. Canada's Francophone dimension is not due to France. It's due to the French Canadians fighting side by side with the British and the First Nations to push back American advances on Canadian soil. The 1775 to 77, the Guy Carleton, governor of the time, had a close affinity to the people, the French Canadians. He found them very friendly, very courageous, had a good rapport with them. And when he saw in the States the movement of independence started and dissatisfaction and an uprising in the making, he spent 2 years to negotiate with Britain so that in 1774, the Quebec Act was passed, which guaranteed French-speaking people in Canada, because Quebec was Canada, both were the same at the time, guaranteed rights to religion and language. Huge difference. Because in the movement of independence United States, their ally was France. They expected to come into Canada and the French Canadians to join them and to push the British out of North American soil. They would have access to the seaway and reduce the capacity of reinforcements by the British. Due to Guy Carleton's effort and respect for the people that were there, the French Canadians fought with the British. Most of them were neutral, many of them were neutral. Easily understood when you consider their families varied between 12 and 21 or 25. But nevertheless, they made the difference. We know of Laurent Secourt in the later war. Same thing happened in that first war where a fellow by the name of Antoine Gautier, who warned the Canadian and British forces of an upcoming American advances. The second number is 1812 to 1814. Again, the Canadian, the British, the Loyalists, and the First Nations combined, and they pushed back Canadian advances. 2012, 200-year anniversary of those partnerships that existed. This fighting side by side is where Canadian identity comes from. You see right in the middle, on top of that, you see a rock. The French, when they sold Canada to the British, they said the country of rocks and snow. kind of saying it's a little value because they had bigger ideas than what they were doing in Europe. On one side, we see the British soldier. Here it's actually Guy Carleton, and he's got his sword forward on the rock, representing kind of the land of Canada, and the other hand is outstretched. Parallel to that, you see the Union Jack to show that is the British presence and contribution. It's Guy Carleton representing 1775, but it could be Brock on the 1812 war. They would make no difference. The importance here is the British contribution in those battles. And we'll come back to the hands in a minute. On the other side, we have a fellow dressed as a Canadian. He too has his sword facing forward. He's presented as a Canadian because generally they were kind of militia. Most of them were ordinary people. And they fought with the British. It's also to clarify that it's not France. It's actually French Canadians. It's actually the people of Quebec of the time who fought with the British. In the center, we presently have an arrow that would represent the First Nations. Behind the picture of the Canadian, you see again his arm outstretched. From that, you see the Quebec flag. It's to make the point, it's not France, it's where presently Quebec exists that was part of that cooperation. Now you also see as the hands are outstretched, there are 5 flags on the hands of the Canadian and 5 flags on the hands of the British representation. There you see flags of all countries, different nationalities. And that's to say, from this cooperative effort between the British and the French Canadians and the First Nations, the climate has been people of all nationalities are welcome. In reality, the French-English relationship with Canada has been a little bit like Siamese twins. They're tied together. They wish often the other party wasn't there, but the more they get along, the better they can function, the better Canada can function. And we've succeeded. And we've succeeded to create an atmosphere, an attitude of openness, willingness to listen to other perspectives, and welcome all these people who've contributed so much to our country. Then in the back of them, we see the maple leaf. Again, it's a symbolism of Canada. The maple leaf in itself, the 2 figures there are both 6 feet, actually 6 feet high. So the maple leaf going on top, it's around 9–10 feet. So again, maple leaf symbolizes Canada. We want to do a change on that. On the maple leaf, we want to take the center of that between the British and the French Canadian, and in their place, paint a picture of Tecumseh. Tecumseh was the great Indian chief who fought during the War of 1812 to 1814 with the British Loyalist French Canadian forces to again push back some of the American advances. So we feel that the sword was not strong enough to represent that, so by adding that, it represents his contribution, but also by placing him into the maple leaf, it shows that within Canada, it's completely embedded in the land that is now called our country, and the role of the First Nations in so many ways in the foundation of our country. Coming through the middle, right in the middle of the maple leaf, you see the Canadian flag. It's the biggest. And again, everything comes together at the focal point, which is the Canadian flag. So we see, in a sense, Canada, cooperative effort between the British and the French Canadians and the First Nations, created a great country by the greatness of the maple leaf, where everyone is welcome, as we see the open hands, hands of hospitality, place to live, one of the best countries in the world, the last 10 years within the top 2 or 3 consistently, and created by this partnership and doing things ensemble together.